From your bulletin, today's sermon notes, grab a pencil or pen. Today we're looking at what the principles of life tell us, our second message on Creation Mythbusters. Well, last week, if you were with us, we discovered the difference between people who believe that we are created by a God or those who believe that we just happen to be here. That the difference between the two isn't that one is science and one is religion. The difference is not that one group looks at scientific facts and the other ignores the facts. The difference between creation and evolution is our worldview. And a worldview is that the fundamental beliefs that we build our lives on, and everybody has a worldview. So the difference between creationists and evolutionists is those presuppositions that we bring. It's the assumptions before we even do science. And last week we pointed out that the assumptions are that there is a God and God acted somehow to make everything, or there isn't a God, or if there is a God, he didn't act. That those assumptions are beliefs. Those assumptions are not proven. Those assumptions are beliefs that are really religious statements. So whether creation or evolution, really, we're both starting from a statement of our faith. We're starting with religion. And we here at St. Paul, we believe in God, and more specifically, the God in the Bible. That the God of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is the one who made everything. And we believe that his word is true. That God teaches us all truth. That's what we heard in that lesson a few moments ago from Job chapter 38. God knows way, way more than we do. And that whole chapter is a list of questions that God is asking that we don't know the answers to. That God knows everything and we don't. So will the source of your truth be God and his word, or will it be man and his word? Now, some say that the minute that we mention God or the Bible, that then we're no longer being scientific. That if you mention God or the Bible, then your views aren't really taken seriously these days. It's as if science and religion, people believe, just can't coexist, that they can't get along. And today we're going to show that they can. In fact, science is knowledge, and it's great, and it's a certain type of knowledge, and it's limited. And religion is a different kind of knowledge, and actually the two complement each other. The two don't conflict with each other. Now, I'm not a scientist, and so I needed some help to bring a message to you on this topic. I had to do a little research. And so, much of today's content comes from the Answers in Genesis series by Ken Ham, and from the book I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Norman Geisler and Frank Turek, and The Case for Creator by Lee Strobel. And today, the myth that we're going to examine is this, that creation is supported by faith and not science, and evolution is supported by science and not faith. And so what we're going to do is look at the principles of science and see what the principles of science tell us about life and the universe and all that exists. But before we do, we've got to take a moment and get clear on a few definitions, a few terms. And the first is principle. Principle. What's a scientific principle? A principle in science is a fundamental, primary, general law or a fact from which others are derived. It's proved. It's observed. A theory, on the other hand, is different from a principle. A theory is a proposed explanation, and yet it's still conjectural. It's not proved yet. It's a guess, a very educated guess, but it's a guess that's shaped by our beliefs, by our worldview. And we also need to talk about different kinds of science, and science, or what some creationists call observational science, same thing. That is data that exists in the present, in the here and now. It's testable. You can repeat it. You can study it now. For example, a fossil of a dinosaur, okay? The dinosaur lived a long time ago. It got buried. Its bones were preserved in layers of rock. Now the question, we can look at it. Now we can measure it. We can study it. We can observe it. Another example, a comet. Comets are large rocks zooming through space. Maybe they have gases with them, and they've been going around our solar system for a long, long time. When does a comet exist? Now. Again, we can observe it. We can calculate its speed. We can calculate its orbit. We can analyze the light to see what elements are there, what rocks and gases. So there's this observational science where we can look at things today and study them and measure them. Now, the other kind of science is what's called forensic science. So if I ask, how did that fossil of a dinosaur come to be? Well, I can't study that. I can make the best guess possible based on studying the fossil, but I can't really say with 100% certainty how that dinosaur and its fossil, its skeleton came to be. I can't go out in the field and I can't see a dinosaur living these days. I can't observe a live dinosaur. I can't take a living dinosaur into the lab and measure it. So forensic science is the best explanation of how the things that I can see now, like its skeleton, how it came to be. The best explanation. Any of you watch the CSI TV shows? Yeah, okay. You know, crime scene investigation, and the police, they look at a crime scene, and they look at the evidence, and they observe it, and they take photos of it, and they take some of the evidence back to the crime lab, and they run forensics on the bullets, and then they study a murdered person's body in an autopsy, and they test the evidence that exists now, and then, based on all that they know about the evidence, they try to piece together what happened. The police try to figure out what's the best explanation for how the evidence, the crime scene, got to be that way. They try to reconstruct what took place. Now, if the police don't have all the evidence, you know what? They could draw a really wrong conclusion, and that's happened. And if we don't have all the evidence today, we can draw a really wrong conclusion too. So today we're going to look at principles. We're going to look at laws of science. We're going to ask ourselves this question: which forensic explanation best fits the data, the observational data? Which explanation makes the most sense to explain how things got to be that way today? Which is the most reasonable explanation for the facts that we know are true? And it's my hope that today we'll discover whether it's evolution or creation, which is the best explanation for how things came to be. So let's look at two laws of science. And the first is the law of causality. And basically this law of science says that everything that has come to be has a cause. This is the fundamental principle of science. It's stated this way: every material effect must have an adequate antecedent, that's before, prior, or simultaneous, same time, cause. So for every material effect, there has to be a cause before or at the same time, and it has to be adequate. For example, let me take the ball that I used earlier, okay? And if I throw that in the air and catch it, okay, what caused that to go up in the air? Well, my arm put enough energy on it, put more energy on it than the force of gravity pulling down, and so it went up until it slowed and gravity pulled it back down. Now, if it goes up in the air and you can't see how it got up there, did you see that? And I say, oh, it was that ant. It was that ant down there. See it right there? It threw it up in the air. And you'd say, come on now. I mean, an ant can lift more than its own weight, but an ant doesn't have enough strength to throw a ball like that up in the air. So the cause has to adequately explain the effect. It has to be enough, sufficient explanation. And parents, you instinctively, you know the cause, this law of causality. You come home, and there is your favorite, your most expensive vase. Maybe it was something that you inherited, and it's in shatters, and there's a hard ball sitting in amidst the shards. And right away, what question do parents ask? Who threw the ball and broke my vase? And you know, what are kids going to answer? Not me, not me, not me, not me. And so then parents ask this question. Well, somebody had to throw it because the vase didn't just break itself. Sound familiar? Yeah, okay. That's the law of causality. So in science, when there's a tidal wave in the ocean, scientists ask, well, what caused it? And if I say, well, I was on the beach, and I was jumping up and down on the beach, they'd say, well, that's not an adequate cause for a tidal wave. And instead, they would look for an earthquake underneath the ocean that would cause the tidal wave. The law of causality, cause and effect. An effect has a cause. So let's apply this now to the question of why are we here? And the first answer to this question of why are we here is that we've always existed. That the universe has always been here. Everything needed to make life always existed. And actually, that explanation has been what scientists have believed and people have believed for a long, long time. Greek philosophers, Aristotle, many people throughout the centuries believed that the matter, the things needed for life always were here until 1916. In 1916, Dr. Albert Einstein, he made his calculations and came up with his theory of relativity. And the theory of relativity predicted that the universe is expanding. And so scientists looked and they observed what's going on in our universe, and they discovered, yes, the universe is expanding. And today, it's the consensus of scientists in all fields of science that the universe is spreading apart. And this means that there must have been a time when it was all closer together, a time when the universe did not exist. And this diagram here shows on the one side a bright spot, which would be the beginning, a powerful event, an explosion, some call it the Big Bang, when the universe began. And then as we go across over towards the right, it's kind of like a sideways cup that things in the universe are gradually moving apart from each other, that they were once all close together, and now they're moving apart. And you can see the arrows at the far right side, and it says pretty much we don't know what's going to happen next. It could be a big rip. And the big rip would be that things get so far apart that the gravity between all the parts of the universe will no longer hold the universe together. It won't pull it together, and so it'll just rip apart. It could be that the universe will just keep on expanding, or it could be that there'll be a big crunch and that everything will come back all together. So when we ask what caused the universe to exist, what it got it started, the only logical answer is before the universe began, something got it started. There must have been a cause for all of this. That if things did not exist prior to the beginning of the universe, which science tells us that the universe began, then something caused it. The law of causality means because the universe does indeed exist, it has to have a cause. Something caused it into being. And creationists, we say, well, God made the universe. The Bible says in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, people who believe in evolution would counter and say, okay, well, where did God come from? As if God had to have been caused to come into being. Yet the question, where did God come from, if you think about it, isn't really a valid question, because remember the law of causality says that everything that has come to be has a cause. And God, by definition, has never come to be. God is eternal. Never a time when God didn't exist. God always was. He doesn't have or need a cause. So, let me ask, does the law of causality in science better agree with creation or evolution? Which of those two best explains the cause of the universe? Well, let's look at another observable scientific principle, and that's the law of probability. This is a mathematical principle. And here we're going to look at the complexity, the fine-tuning of the universe. It uses math. We'll use math to calculate the probability of this just happening by chance. Like this. Take a look at this picture. By sheer chance, could this happen all by itself? That you go to the laundry room and your clothes are in the dryer and they're tumbling around and they're drying, they're going every which way, all willy-nilly, and then you open the dryer door and there are your clothes, all folded properly and stacked neatly. Wouldn't that be great? And some of you, I think all that you're going to get out of today's service is, I want a dryer like that. I want that to happen in my laundry room. But, you know, if you open the dryer and your clothes were all folded neatly and stacked like that, you would immediately think, somebody's up to something. Somebody's trying to pull a trick on me, because the probability of that just happening is ridiculous. You know, somebody's messing with you. Now, what about our world? What about the universe? What's the mathematical probability that the complexity of our universe just happened by itself? Or did someone, some creator, have a hand in making our world so that it's not by chance at all. In the scientific field of astronomy, gravitational force is verifiable, it's testable, it's observable, it's constant. Everyone agrees on these facts of gravitational force, and it's been proven to have the exact gravitational force that is in our world in order to exist. So if we were to alter the force of gravity, not by 1%, but by 1/10 times 10 to the 38th power, that's a fraction so small, billions times trillions small. If gravity were altered by that infinitesimal amount, it would have disastrous consequences. The sun could not exist. We would not exist. So there's this amazing, amazing precision in our universe. What we find is that must be in place for us to have life. And we have to stop and ask ourselves, what's the probability that this could have just happened by chance? Or does that precision point to an intelligent designer of our world? Let's watch this on the screens now, please.
A lot of things went right on Earth to have yielded complex life, absolutely.
The number of factors that have been postulated has grown. Currently, the typical number you would see is, in a typical list, would have something like 20.
We find that we need to be at the right location in the galaxy, that we're inside the circumstellar habitable zone of the star, that we're in a planetary system with giant planets that can shield the inner planets from too many comet impacts, that we're orbiting the right kind of star that's not too cool or not too hot, that we're on a planet that has a moon that can stabilize the tilt of its axis, that we're on a planet that's a terrestrial planet, a planet that has a crust of liquid iron cores that can generate a magnetic field, that has an atmosphere that has enough oxygen to allow for complex organisms to survive, that has enough water and enough continents to allow for the diversity of life or an active biosphere that need to support complex creatures such as ourselves. All these factors have to be met at one place and time in the galaxy if you're going to have a planet as habitable as the Earth, which you need for complex and even technological life.
In an attempt to estimate the probability of attaining this combination of factors simultaneously, some researchers have developed equations assigning a conservative 1 in 10 value to each factor deemed necessary for advanced life.
If every element has to be there at the same time, you have to multiply the probabilities. And that's what makes the probability at the end so small. You've got 10% of this and 10% of that, and these things rapidly multiply to exceedingly small numbers. The numbers on the order of 10 to the minus 15, which is 1/1000th or 1 trillion. And it's a number like that that you have to compare to the 100 billion stars that are in the galaxy. 100 billion is a very large number, but 1,000th of a trillionth is much, much smaller. On their face value, these probabilities are speaking. What they're telling us is this can't happen, or this is very unlikely to happen in the galaxy. And that's where the evidence is pushing us.
There are many probabilistic resources in the galaxy, but on the other side of the coin are all these factors that you need. You have to get just right in order to have just one habitable planet like the Earth. And that leads me to conclude that yes, we're rare in the galaxy.
So here we're seeing the probability of all of those conditions being met at one time is 1,000 trillionth And so I think I got those numbers right. I'm not sure I heard them correctly. But so the probability is just so small that to have life on Earth just couldn't be by happenstance reasonably. And the Bible tells us every house is built by someone, but the builder of all things is God. So we see this amazing precision. It's not just in astronomy. It happens in micro 28th power. That's billions times billions times billions. It's a number so big we can't even imagine it, and that's the number of cells in your body. Every day your body replaces a trillion cells. So guys, next time you're just laying on the couch, the contention was that a cell was just a simple form of life, just a little blob of living goo. But today, through technology, we're beginning just to scratch the surface of the complexity of each one of those cells. This is an actual picture of a cell, and all these intricate parts must exist at the same time in order for one cell to live. All of these trillions of incredibly complex cells make up one protein in just each cell. Each and every protein has to be arranged in precise orders in order just to reproduce life. Now, each one of our lives, is it reasonable to conclude that we're just one extremely lucky accident in evolution or creation is most reasonable? Now, friends, maybe you're wondering, why does this matter for us here? Setting, men may know that there is none beside me. God wants us to know him, to look at our world and know him. He wants us in a relationship with him, to know him. It goes on, I am the Lord, and there is no other. I form the light and create darkness. I bring prosperity and create disaster. I, the Lord, do all these things. So he's saying, I'm the creator. So, creator of all that exists. And because he's the creator, he says, you heavens above, rain down righteousness. If we're responsible to a creator, if there is a creator, then we are in a relationship with him, and that means I can't just live any way I want. I am responsible to him. Rain down righteousness, living rightly, living morally, living right, loving others as God would love others because of what Jesus has done. Acknowledging God means we're responsible to him morally, which is why there's so much. And it goes on, let the clouds shower it down, let the earth open wide, let salvation spring up, let righteousness grow with it. I, the Lord, have created it. And in Isaiah 43, I, the Lord, created you. I formed you. Don't be afraid, so fear not. I have rescued you because he made you. He's sent his son, Jesus, to rescue you. Gave his son who gave his life. I've called you by name. He loves you. Calls you by name. That happened in your baptism. And now, here's your future. You belong to me, now and forever. That's why this matters so much. Our whole relationship with him. Our forgiveness, our future, our eternal heaven, our salvation, all depends on God who made us. I invite you now to join me in our statement of faith today.